I received an email from a chap called James a few weeks ago who suggested it might be a good idea for me to review some headphone amps. I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea, so I ordered 3 from the same store in China via eBay. They're all tube headphone amps. I'll show you how you put one together first of all, because it comes in these separate parts inside the box. First off, we've got the power supply. You can see it's multi-voltage, 100 to 240 volts with a 6 volts 2 amp output and a US style plug. The amp itself is quite a small device. You can see we've got an out and an in on the front, a volume control which is kind of stepped. It's one of those clicky ones, you can feel it moving around. On the back we've got a power in and an on-off switch, and that's pretty much it. Pretty simple device. There's a tiny bit of assembly required because the tubes are packed separately to protect them during shipping. I really like the look of tubes. That's why I ordered 3 tube ones, really, just because I'm comparing like for like, and also they do look pretty cool as well. So let's plug them into the sockets here. You can see you can only put them in one way due to the way the legs are configured. You've got to push them down. A little bit of force required here, so do it gently, of course, so you don't break anything. And then plug the power in and switch them on. As you can see, I've got little blue LEDs in the bottom here, presumably for aesthetic reasons, but the tubes themselves are nice enough anyway. You can see the orange glow in the dark there. So this little headphone amp cost me £28 delivered. Let's have a look at the next one. Similar idea, comes in a box, everything's separate again. This is a single tube amp though. The power supply on this one is a different one. It's a US plug again, but it's multi-voltage again, but output 12 volts 1 amp on this one. Now, just like before, we've got an in and an out on the front. We've got a volume control on there as well, but this is also the on-off switch as well as the volume. You can see it clicks when I start it there, like an old stereo system. And if we go around the back of this, we've got another input there, input 2, so you can put something in the front and in the back and switch between them with that button there, and of course the power goes in the back as well. Let's just assemble this with that tube again. So same idea, just push it down into there, being careful not to break anything. Obviously with all these tubes I'm cleaning them off after I put them in to get rid of the greasy fingerprints. Plug the power in, turn it on. You can see we've got a little blue LED again in here lighting up that chip that they must be very proud of, and if we turn the lights off we can see that the tube itself has that orange glow just like the other one. And this one cost me slightly more than the other one at £35. Now let's have a look at the last of the boxes. So inside this one, well, we've got 2 elastic bands, we've got a stereo jack lead and a USB lead with a micro B on the end there, because this is a rechargeable device that you charge via USB, because this one is a portable tube headphone amp. As you can see on the front of their portable rechargeable tune headphone amplifier. Now let's have a look around this one. So we've got this sort of aluminium case, bit scratchy on the edges, that seems a bit sharp to carry around with you, but on the back here you can see that's the name of it, the Little Bear B1++, or is that B1+? Not too sure. We've got the charging port there and this little button here. If I press that, you can see the LEDs light up within that battery symbol to show that there's approximately 50% of the rechargeable battery left, and it's supposed to be good for between 3.5 and 4 hours on a full charge. There's the headphone out and the input, and the on-off switch is combined with the volume on this one as well, and as you can see the blue LED comes on when you switch the device on. Now the tube is behind that little window there, quite hard to see, but I'll turn the lights off and you can just about make out the orange glow from that, and of course we've got the ubiquitous blue LED in there as well. And in case you hadn't figured it out, those elastic bands are so you can attach the headphone amp to your portable music device. Now this was the most expensive of the lot at £49. So now I've got all 3 together, we can test them out, but I think you might want to know perhaps why you'd want a headphone amp in the first place. You're better off looking at, say, Wikipedia, where it explains it in a lot more detail than I could go into, and of course there's dedicated forums and things as well. But in a nutshell, you might have an amp that doesn't have a headphone output on it, or perhaps you want to just plug your headphones into a device that doesn't have a headphone out, like a CD or a DVD player, and to do that you could just put the phono outs in the back and plug those into the headphone amp. Also, you might find that your portable music device just isn't loud enough for your headphones, and of course an amp will sort that out. And then finally, you might be buying a headphone amp with the hope that it will improve upon the headphone out that's already on your existing amplifier. Well, I'm going to test all these three for all those three things, but to do that I'm also using three different kinds of headphones. I've got the Sony MDR1R, and then I've got some Philips Fidelio X2s, and then finally noise cancelling headphones, the Bose Quiet Comfort 25. Now I'm going to do a variety of tests, one of which is playing SACDs through this DVD player, so I'm going to do that with all three amps and all three headphones. And then I'm also going to try something that's a bit more normal than just playing a lossless file through the iPhone. Now, one thing about this is, of course, it's coming out of the existing headphone out. So if you think that the headphone out on your iPhone doesn't sound good, then this is just going to be amplifying that bad sound rather than replacing it. And that's the main reason why I did all the tests as well with a Pono player, because this, as well having a standard headphone out, also has a line out, so therefore you're bypassing the headphone amplifier that's built into it. And of course I can play lossless files through this, FLAC files, so those should sound pretty good. Now you should imagine that this took me quite a while to do. I've got three different audio sources, and I'm also using different outputs on those and putting them into three different headphone amps and then trying them with all the different headphones. So this was a couple of weekends worth of testing things, unplugging them, plugging them into something else, listen to the same track again, seeing if I could see any difference between them. And you know what, a lot of it's probably down to the quality of my ears, so other people might get different results to the ones that I did. However, based upon my own experiences, I have managed to come up with some kind of opinion on all three devices. So we'll start off by looking at the silver amp with the one tube in it. Now it does definitely increase the volume of the device that you plug into it, so it's working in that regard, and it also doesn't colour the sound. It sounds just the same, albeit louder. However, I did experience a problem with this unit, and that's the front input is wired up incorrectly. The left and right stereos are swapped around, so if you put the balance over to the right hand side, you'll hear the music coming out of your left ear and vice versa. So to get around this, of course, I use the rear inputs on the device, which are wired up correctly. And as a side effect, it makes the device a little bit easier to use, because if you do have two wires plugged in the front, it can be a little bit tricky to get to that volume knob in between them. Next up, the Little Bear portable rechargeable headphone amp. Well, this was the only one considerate enough to include a stereo fly lead, which I used during all the other tests for the other devices. They should have really included one of those as well, I think. But that's the only positive thing I can come up with, because on the back of this you can see I can press the button here. One of the LEDs isn't lit at 75%. That's not a big deal. What is a bigger deal is the fact that this thing just adds hiss to everything. Let's have a listen. Now you might be thinking here, as I did, that it's a valve, it'll need time to warm up and then the hiss will go away. Well, believe me, it doesn't. I left it on for a number of hours and the hiss remained, unfortunately. So that takes the Little Bear out of the running for me, and then just leaves one amp left to look at, and that's the gold headphone amp with the two valves. Now this one doesn't add any unwanted hiss, it does increase the volume of the thing that's going through it, and it actually makes the sound, in my opinion, a little bit better, slightly richer. However, it does have its own slight issue, and it's this ringing sound, and that's coming from the valves, and it goes straight through the amp into your headphones, so you've got to be very careful that when you use it not to move it around, otherwise you'll just hear ringing in the ears. Back to the question that I posed myself in the title for this video. Is it worth getting a budget headphone tube amp? Well, I'm not exactly sure where they fit in. You see, if somebody's going to spend a heck of a lot of money on a top-end set of headphones, they're not going to try and skimp on their headphone amplifier. Whereas for someone like me with a nice mid-range set of headphones and probably not brilliant hearing, for me, the built-in headphone output on the devices I'm using is perfectly adequate. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, you might just want to add a headphone output onto something that doesn't already have one. Or you might just want to increase the volume output out of something, and all three of these will do that. But of course, as well as increasing the volume, the Little Bear also adds hiss in there, so I couldn't recommend that, even though it's got that valve in there. The idea of carrying around a valve is quite an interesting one, but on this occasion it's one to be avoided. Of course, it could be faulty, but I'll never know because I've only got the one to test. Now this device in the middle, well, of course the stereo is reversed on the front, the left and right, so it means you have to use the ones on the back, which isn't too much of a bad idea because it stops you having to try and get in the middle and use that little tiny volume control between those two wires. So if you just want to increase the volume without colouring the sound, as long as you use the external rear port on that one, definitely sounds fine. And that then leaves my favourite of the three, the gold one with the two tubes, as well as of course being wired up correctly and increasing the volume of the sound. It does seem to improve the sound quality ever so slightly. I'm only talking single digit percentage difference between this and a normal headphone out in my experience, but it does seem to add a little bit of richness and fullness to the sound. The only thing you've got to be careful of course, is moving it or tapping it, because you get that ringing sound through your headphones, but you shouldn't really be moving this around while you're listening to your headphones anyway. Now, I've got a link up in the video description to the store where I bought all these three from, and they do sell lots of other models as well. And the one thing I will say for them is that they were very quick at delivering to the UK. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.